Here we are with our first interview in our series, Small Talk, Big Issues. We are here with that icon of the pharmaceutical world, Paul Sims, longtime chairman of Pharma. So Paul, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
So Paul, I have three questions for you. As you know, this entire series is about digital patients. And we're going to ask you to draw on your experience really being at the center. I mean, you know what's going on in pharma. You know what has been going on in pharma for these last 15 or 20 years even. So I'm going to ask you three questions. First question, will it be pharma who takes the lead in the digital patient support revolution, or will it be somebody else?
Well, Kevin, I wish I could say yes to that question. Unfortunately, I don't think it is going to be pharma, certainly that leads. I think that pharma will play a role, a much stronger role, and of course, pharma would argue right now it's already spending a lot of dollars on doing this. But the truth is that there are these rather large companies that tend to come from the west coast of the US. I'm sure we've all heard of them, and they are addicted to growth. Their investors are addicted to growth. They have obviously been used to double-digit growths for the entirety of their lives, which is in most cases no more than 20 years old. And they are, they've done typically incredibly well from the lockdown situation. That's going to propel them certainly for the next year, maybe the next 18 months. But as the world hopefully returns to some form of normality, we will also find that these companies are going to be looking anywhere that they can to continue the growth curve that they have become accustomed to. And there are really very few industries that they could go to obtain that level of growth. And healthcare is probably the industry, I mean, you could argue education might be another one, but healthcare is probably the only industry that has been guilty of double-digit price increases without a necessarily double-digit increase in value over the past decade, and therefore it is ripe for disruption. Now, we've been talking about big tech in healthcare, big tech in providing better patient engagement and support for a long time. Even recently, some of the recent forays by these big tech companies seem to have been put on ice, or certainly not happened as quickly as they could. But I do still have a strong belief that they will play a huge part in patient engagement going forward. And I think in particular, Amazon, and possibly on a second rung, Apple and Google will be the companies to do that. But I think Amazon will be at the forefront based on what evidence we can see so far and how the company's been able to play its cards so far. Of course, I would love to see pharma playing a more active role. Indeed, most people seem to acknowledge that these large technology companies will encroach into our territory, yet seem to be still not particularly forthright in doing anything about it. They seem to be quite sort of happy for that to happen. Of course, companies genuinely are investing in trying to figure this out, but it's not in the organizational routines of our industry to be as, certainly as customer-oriented and patient-oriented as these companies are, despite the use of the phrase patient-centricity over many years. And I just think that we're going to have a hard time learning new organizational routines, in particular taking on the often fast, rapid reaction level of iterative initiatives that these companies typically try as they go around and building models and systems that could be of use.
That actually leads to my next question, which is what is stopping pharma from taking that lead?
I think at the basic level, it's the sense of being on a diminishing platform, a burning platform of some kind. I think that we feel somewhat insulated, given that our R&D processes are relatively protected against outside invasion. But I do believe that so much of the innovation of the future is going to depend on people outside the R&D department being innovative. And at the moment, I still feel that they're acting like more innovative distributors, which is not really the same as being creative and actually creating assets, creating value for the company at the front end, at the delivery end. And I think that there are a whole host of initiatives that take us from a 2 out of 10 to maybe a 4 out of 10, but I just don't think that's going to be enough on current evidence to stave off this impending involvement from others. I run a lot of webinars, and I often ask, what are the barriers? And a common one is a lack of capabilities that I've just talked about, a lack of mental awareness. But so many people, of course, cite the regulatory landscape, the external environment as being a huge factor as well. And whilst we all sort of say you can't make any excuses. It's not just the regulators. It's, you can still operate within those boundaries. You can see that this COVID-19 has generated some new forms of culture at the regulators. There's certainly a new sense of collaborating and working together, being on the same side for once rather than being on opposing sides. And it does seem that there's a lot of appetite to maintain many of those principles going forward. I think the jury's still out as to whether or not we manage to do that. It's all very easy to say, just as it's very easy to practice penalties, but the moment your football team is in a penalty shootout, all bets are off. So, will we be able to persist beyond the pandemic? I'm not sure, but I certainly think we should try.
That's a really interesting point. We've been talking about that as well at Observia. I mean, one thing that clearly has been demonstrated during the COVID pandemic is that telehealth is possible, and the just opening up the idea of digital. And from the minute that healthcare professionals are dealing with their patients through digital means, then it becomes far, far easier to start proposing to them tools to allow patient support through the same digital means. I mean, the healthcare professionals can push them through. Mm-hmm. But I absolutely get your point that it's undoubtedly and unfortunately likely that perhaps pharma won't be among the more innovative in proposing those tools. Yeah.
That's not to say we can't make headway. We absolutely need to try. There's absolutely a point to all of this, and really, one life saved is often worth a lot of effort. We need to be innovative to the point of being able to change our business model, and I just believe that a leopard is going to have a hard time changing its spots here. We are still drunk on the profits that we've been able to generate simply through price rises and other sort of protectionist measures. And we haven't yet had to face that burning platform, face that abyss that's going to make us actually change direction and build business models, for example, based on investing in digital health such that we're able to obtain new forms of data that then inform new forms of R&D that actually generate a new type of product. We haven't got to that degree yet. We've got pilots all over the place, but scaling them is not something that we've historically been wonderful at. And that's due to some of the reasons I've already discussed.
Yeah, it's like you say, I mean, if necessity is the mother of invention, then success is probably the evil stepmother, I have one last question for you, Paul. And again, that follows on to what you were saying before. You talked about collaboration, likewise with legislators, but likewise, I mean, when it comes to patient support, and you and I have talked about this often, unlike kind of the traditional market share driven business model of I have a statin, you have a statin, he has a statin, which one gets prescribed. When we talk about patient support, including digital patient support, there's no earthly reason for us not to work together, right? So do you think that there's a future for collaboration across pharma companies, perhaps to face the kind of GAFA threat that you're talking about?
I am really pleased to say that in the last 3 years, I've seen a lot of genuine initiatives in order to do this. Could it go further? Obviously it could. Will it go further? Then I think we have to look at really the fundamentals. It sort of depends, really. It depends on how strongly we're being reimbursed and being supported around patient outcomes. If we do have a true value-based care system, then I think that might help us transcend the organizational boundaries of competition that we've traditionally faced. It still seems to me, though, when I talk to people in market access, in reimbursement, they have a very competitive beat mindset, beat the competition mindset. And I think that's a doctrine that's been built up over many years, and it's quite difficult to again change that one. So the idea of working collaboratively, building anything that could raise the tide for all, still seems a little bit frightening to many companies. I think personally that patient collaboration should not be the area of differentiation that you rely on. I think that, yes, that does actually come back to the science and having superior products. Very easy for me to say, of course, but I think the superiority of a product should outweigh whether or not you collaborate to produce a platform with a competitor. And I also believe that, as I say, there should be further innovation on top of that platform by the commercial people in the organization that would provide the differentiation that they're looking for.
That's an excellent point, though. I mean, there's so many times that we have pharma companies who are saying, I want to get a competitive edge through this patient support program. That's not the point. The point is, one of the things that we often say is, furthermore, this is a way to help you allow your product to reach its clinical promise. You demonstrated that it can do something in a controlled clinical environment in your studies. And it's not going to do that in the real world because the variable is adherence and patient acceptance of the treatment. And so it's not about getting a competitive edge. It's about really allowing your product to deliver the value you showed it could have.
Yeah. But you and I both know also that the most sophisticated patient support programs, and when I say sophisticated, I don't mean technologically sophisticated, I mean behaviorally sophisticated and also deep-rooted in the organization. It's not just a sort of add-on plus one. We know that those kind of patient support programs can be quite transformative at deeper levels within the organization, and I'm sure we both would wish that companies took a more thoughtful approach to this, and that includes the collaborative aspect.
Exactly. I lied when I said I had only one more question. I actually have one last question. I promise this is the last one.
For you, Kevin, for you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, you just talked about how a program, how an initiative can have a kind of represent kind of an epiphany inside a company. Was there an epiphany for you? Was there a point, something that you saw, thought, experience that kind of said, wow, this patient centricity is the way to go. It is what the future of pharma.
Yeah. Well, I first said the word patient centricity in February 2004, which, I'm not saying that I was the father of any kind of movement. I wouldn't claim any credit there, but I think it does show how long we have been talking about it for. It obviously gathered a lot of momentum, but for me personally, I think I can't put it down to a single moment apart from my rising frustration with the unfulfilled potential of our industry. I just think that if there was a CEO of healthcare, which obviously there isn't and there probably never will be, we would organize things very differently. It does seem to me that there is this large global industry, let alone set of companies with reach, with financial resources, with system know-how, with scientific prowess, and we channel all of that into, pushing a few medicines from one corner of that industry. And I just believe that if we were somehow able to distribute that expertise more sensibly across, then we would indeed raise the tide for all. So not a single event. There wasn't a eureka moment where I jumped out the bath. But I suppose, that's the reason why so many of us stay in this industry. Very few, even people at the very top of our industry, actually choose to work in pharma. It seems to have been an accidental career for so many of us. Yet when we're here, we tend to stay. And it's not just because of the relatively high salaries that we pay our people. I think it's because of the unfulfilled potential, and in many cases because of some personal story, not in my case. But we all know that really we as human beings should be able to design this better than we have done so far. And we're on a mission still for many years to come, I'm sure.
Well, Paul, for all that time, you've been helping the pharma industry very much to learn from each other. And personally, I think that what you've been
That's the problem, Kevin. That's the problem. We need to learn from others as well.
Okay, well, you've been helping in that respect as well. All of the patient advocacy people that you've brought in, all of the people from outside the industry and across the various conferences, not to mention the less publicly visible stuff that you've done. I think that you've been a real positive influence in terms of helping to raise awareness in pharma, and I'll congratulate you for that from the bottom.
Thank you, Kevin. But I don't think your performance here has been too shabby either. You've certainly taken a lot of creativity and chutzpah to the way in which we can do this. And Observia is a great company from every observation that I've looked at, and I wish it every success in the future.
Great to talk to you, and I hope that we'll have a chance to get together physically in the near future.
One day. Thank you.